Hello, I'm George from Ireland, and behind me is the house where Dame Edith Sitwell lived for much of her adult life, and indeed where she died. So Edith Sitwell is one of the three Sitwell siblings who were all significant littérateurs of the mid-20th century in this country. So she's born in Scarborough, as in Are You Going to Scarborough Fair, or Joe Scarborough. That's in Yorkshire, this northerly county in England, the largest county in England, and she was very well got. Both her mother and father came from aristocratic families, and on her mother's side she was descended from the Plantagenet kings of England. So materially she lacked for nothing. She had two younger brothers, Osbert and Sacheverell. Sacheverell, as in that's a surname really, after the noted 17th and 18th century political and literary figure, Dr. Sacheverell. I don't think they were related to him, in fact. So she lacked for other things, though, insofar as her parents were very aloof, were virtually unknown to her. She felt they were cold-hearted, so they were real oddbods, and she was quite strange herself. So she's brought up more by her governess, and she formed the maternal bond with her governess, not with her parents at all. Her relationship with her mother was so dysfunctional that when her mother died, Edith refused to attend her mother's obsequies. So she hardly went to school, mainly brought up by the governess, and indeed as a child, her parents refused to let the children even dine with them until such time as they had proper table manners. Had to dine in a separate room with the governess, and then governors being like the top servants, the only ones who could later on dine with the family, because they were educated. They were middle class or even maybe upper class, fallen on slightly hard times, had to work for a living. So Dame Edith never had to work for a meaning there was plenty of family money. Her parents both had literary ambitions and were quite erudite. So her brothers went to Eton, but as I say, she didn't go to secondary school, governesses and all that. And then in her early 20s, she left home. She moved to London, to Bayswater, and she actually lived with her governess. Not that her governess was really looking after her, more of a paid companion, because that was her surrogate family, was the governess really. And, well, her brothers, or of course her blood family. So she began her literary endeavours, and she was a poetess, particularly of the new forms of poetry. I didn't really warm to her stuff. And she was a literary scholar, publishing a fairly well appreciated book about Alexander Pope, saying he was really the forerunner of the Romantic movement. Some of that's true. So she knew everyone who was anyone in literary London in the early 20th century. Now, she was afflicted by this appalling taste in men. And for a man to be attracted to her, he had to be really unavailable, either already married or else gay. And she had this disastrous relationship with a Chilean artist. Later, she was absolutely smitten by Pavel Chelytiev, I hope I pronounced it correctly, a Russian painter who was here in London in the 1920s, who was inveterately homosexual. So, although he was very fond of her, a dear friend of hers, he had no romantic feelings to her whatsoever, which she found difficult to accept. And there were similar other cataclysmic relationships with married men, which never really got going anywhere. She looked rather strange. She was born with Marfan's syndrome, same thing that Abraham Lincoln probably had. And she was 6 foot tall, which is well above average height for a woman, but in those days it was like gigantic. And she had this curvature of the spine. Her father made this iron cage to try and reverse that, but it didn't really work, and it caused her just bitter resentment, so she felt very rancorous towards her father as well. So she published a novel about Jonathan Swift, Under the Black Sun. I Live Under the Black Sun, which was well received. So she became increasingly eccentric as her life went on. Her father moved to Switzerland, later died there, and there was no longer quite so much family money as there had been before. She toured the United States after the Second World War, giving readings from her poetry and her particular take on one of Lady Macbeth's soliloquies. So she was a Shakespearean scholar too. So she was given this dameship, an honour by the Queen for her services to literature. She died in 1967, if I got that right, buried somewhere in Northamptonshire. I think she was born in 1881, so she never wed, never had children. She was really the talk of the town, appearing in a lot of magazines and newspapers in the 1930s into the 1940s. Kind of quite spooky looking, a bit like a witch because of her elongated and what would I say, lugubrious features, quite angular, gave her a Diabolonian air. So that is Dame Edith Sitwell, who lives here in Hampstead, which is a well-known literary area. Well, they're said to be Hampstead liberals, you know, they're woolly liberals, they wear a woolly, they have their woolly opinions, they're champagne socialists and all that, although she was not terribly interested in politics, so far as I know. So follow me on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, yeah, choose online lessons with me in history, politics, religious studies, English as a foreign language, English literature, anything in the humanities really, French and law, and choose me as your tour guide in Londinium. I help people with essays, dissertations and theses, and I translate from French, Spanish, Italian, Romanian, German and Russian. Toodaloo.